The metal gate clanked shut behind me with a sound that felt heavier than steel. It was the same old entrance my grandfather built decades before I was born. A rust-flecked barrier with a simple latch that marked where the town stopped and our land began. I'd spent the morning picking up bolts and fencing supplies from the hardware store, thinking I'd spend a quiet afternoon clearing brush around the lake. Instead, I rolled up the gravel driveway and realized peace wasn't on the agenda. Voices carried through the pines. Before the lake even came into view, laughter, music, the kind you hear at a summer cookout. The tree line opened, and there they were, about a dozen people spread across the shore, like they owned it. Fold-out chairs, coolers, fishing poles dipping into the water, a portable speaker blasting classic rock. Smoke curled from a grill someone had dragged, right down to the shoreline. But what stopped me cold wasn't the grill or the crowd. It was her. A blonde woman in a pastel cardigan standing dead center, arms crossed like she was posing for a magazine ad titled Queen of the Suburbs. Her expression said she was in charge. Not politely. Completely. I stepped out of the truck, phone already recording in my hand. I wasn't angry yet, just suspicious. I'd only lived here a few weeks, moved into the old house my uncle willed to me. I hadn't even settled boxes, and now strangers were using my family's lake like a public park. Walking toward them, pine needles crunching under my boots, I raised my voice just enough to be heard. "Can someone explain why there's a party on my land?" The music kept going. Most people ignored me. A couple of heads turned, nothing more. Then she spun around. "I was wondering when you'd show up," she said, her tone bright but cold. "Mr. Brennan, right?" I nodded. "That's me. And this is private property." She smiled like someone patronizing a child. "Actually, it's shared community space. This lake has been used by residents for years. We have every right to be here." That was the sentence that told me who I was dealing with. Power people don't argue facts, they argue confidence. They say things like they've already won and hope you'll fold rather than fight. "What's your name?" I asked. She lifted her chin. "Karen Morrison. President of the Lakeview Meadows HOA. Of course, I zoomed my phone camera in slightly, keeping my voice steady. "I'm not a member of your HOA, and this property isn't part of its boundaries." She laughed loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Just because you inherited a house nearby doesn't mean you own the lake. Residents have used this water long before you showed up." Her audience nodded, some folding arms, some looking irritated that I'd interrupted their fun. The kind of casual hostility that comes from believing a lie so long it feels like truth. I'd spent years in courtrooms. Before retiring early, I knew how people build myths out of convenience. "Do you have any paperwork proving shared access?" I asked, a tiny flicker behind her, eyes out, quickly buried. "I don't need to show you anything. The community knows the truth." No, they knew her truth. "Well, until you show documentation, everyone needs to pack up," I said. "You're trespassing." A guy flipping burgers stepped forward. "Come on, man. We're not hurting anything. It's just a lake. Lighten up." I shook my head. "I don't have a problem with people having fun. I have a problem with people acting like my property is theirs." Karen pulled out her phone. "Fine. If you want to escalate, we'll do this the official way. I'm calling the police. You're harassing community members on shared land?" I almost smiled. "Please do. I'd like this documented." I stepped back to the gate, leaned against the post, and waited. 20 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. Deputy Mark Hernandez stepped out, someone I actually went to high school with. Small-town realities. The past always overlaps the present. He greeted me first. "Mike, didn't expect to see you like this." Karen rushed in before I could respond. "Officer, thank you." He refused to give us access to the lake, even though our HOA maintains rights to it. He threatened people, and Mark raised a hand. "Do you have legal easement documentation?" Her jaw tightened. "It's on file." "I don't carry paperwork when I'm out enjoying my community." Mark turned to me. You've got proof of ownership? I pulled out my phone and opened a PDF I'd downloaded earlier. Recorded deed from 1947. No shared access rights. No easement. Property line includes the entire lake. He studied it, nodded once, then turned back to Karen. Ma'am, unless you can provide documentation, he's within his rights. Everyone needs to leave. The mood shifted instantly. Chairs folded. People muttered under their breath. Someone whispered, "This isn't over." A woman walking past me sneered, "You really gonna be that guy?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Karen lingered last, her stare sharp enough to cut glass. "You're making enemies you don't want," she said quietly. "This community won't back down." I met her gaze. "Neither will I." She left without another word. When the last car pulled away, the silence felt heavy. Grill ash blown across the grass, soda cans in the mud, a fishing hook snagged in the reeds. A torn "No Trespassing" sign lay half buried in the dirt like a flag fallen in battle. I locked the gate with my grandfather's old Kia, heavy brass piece worn smooth from decades of use. The same key that used to jingle on his belt when he'd take me fishing as a kid. Something about closing that gate felt symbolic, like drawing a boundary not just on land, but on memory. Back on the porch, I opened my laptop and pulled up county land records. Karen's confidence wasn't ordinary entitlement. It was rehearsed, planned. She believed she had claims because somewhere in her mind, she'd justified them. Scrolling through records, surveys, archived filings. Something caught my eye. An easement petition filed 3 years ago by Lakeview Meadows Homeowners Association, denied. The reason stated in bold, no legal basis. Private property with no history of shared access. I leaned back in my chair, exhaled long and slow. So she'd already tried to get rights and failed. The party at the lake wasn't ignorance. It was defiance. And defiance with a plan meant this wasn't over. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Back off. This lake isn't yours alone. Don't make this harder. I didn't reply. I just screenshot it. That night, the lake was quiet. Moonlight rippled across the water like a sheet of silver. I stood by the gate, hand resting on the cold metal, remembering my grandfather's words from a long time ago. Boundaries aren't lines on a map. They're promises you protect. And I realized this wasn't about fish or parties or neighbors. It was about someone trying to rewrite history. And I wasn't about to let that happen. The next morning started like any other coffee brewing. Sun climbing over the tree line, a quiet breeze brushing the water, but the calm felt dishonest. Like the world was holding its breath. After everything that happened at the lake, I expected silence. Instead, I walked outside and saw something that put me on edge. Cars were driving by slower than usual, not stopping, just slowing. Windows cracked, eyes lingering. One woman even held up her phone like she was filming the property. When she noticed me watching, she sped up, but the message was already delivered. I was being talked about, not directly. Not openly, but whispered about. Small towns don't need newspapers to spread news. They use front porches, text threads, neighbors leaning over mailboxes. I headed toward mine as casually as possible and found someone. "Already there, Gerald?" Older guy in his late 60s. Silver hair, the same man who'd once brought over a casserole when I moved in. He kept his eyes on his mailbox as if I wasn't there. "Morning," I said. He nodded stiffly. "Morning." Something tense in his voice. Like a man caught doing something he shouldn't. Finally, he shut the mailbox and turned slightly. "Look, Mike, I don't want to get pulled into anything." I raised a brow. "Pulled into what?" he sighed. "People are saying you threatened families at the lake, that you called the cops on kids just trying to enjoy the community." Karen sent out a message last night. Of course she did. "What did she say exactly?" I asked. He hesitated. "That you're hostile?" that you're trying to block shared access, that you're creating conflict where there was peace. I felt my jaw tighten. Karen wasn't just pushing a Lee, she was building a narrative, a villain, a threat, and she needed the community to believe it before the truth came out. That's not what happened, I said. Gerald lifted a hand like a man refusing communion. I'm not taking sides. I'm just telling you what's going around. My wife is on the HOA board. She and Karen are close. I'd keep your head down if I were you. Turned and walked off, pace quick, shoulders tight. He wasn't warning me because he cared. He was warning me because he was afraid of being seen, talking to me too long that told me everything I needed to know. The battle had already moved from the lake to the neighborhood, and I was losing the public narrative. I walked back inside, set my coffee down, and opened my laptop. If Karen wanted to play politics, fine. I'd play law. 2 hours later, my desk was covered in digital notes and screenshots. I wasn't just looking for proof anymore. I was building a timeline, a story that couldn't be twisted. The deed from 1947, county maps, surveys, ownership transfers, no easement, no shared rights, no legal access. Every document said the same thing: this land belonged to the Brennan family, period. But facts don't matter if people don't see them. Half-truths spread faster than evidence. That's when I found something important. 3 years earlier, Karen had filed an easement petition on behalf of the HOA. The planning board denied it in writing. The document was clear, stamped, and legally binding. They'd told her no, and she'd pretended they said yes. That was the first crack in her story. But there was another detail in the petition that made my stomach twist. Attached letters from residents, claiming they'd used the lake for years without issue. Those letters were signed, names, addresses, witnesses, not because they were malicious, because they were misled. Karen had built her lie slowly, brick by brick, till the community believed the lake belonged to them. She was never trying to steal access. She was trying to rewrite ownership. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, fingers tapping the desk. Why go this far? Why lie when the documents prove otherwise? Why risk legal trouble for a lake? Power doesn't explain everything. Money does. That was when I called Tom. He picked up on the second ring. You sound like you found something. Maybe, I said. Pull every filing tied to Lakeview Meadows. Petitions, communications, board minutes. If there's a motive here, it's hidden in paper trails. Tom exhaled. I'll start digging, but give me something to look for. Look for money, I said. Nobody manufactures rights unless they plan to sell them. There was silence on the line. Then Tom's voice tightened. I'll call you back. I hung up and walked to the porch. Fresh pins held a new sign to the gate: private property, no public access. Sunlight flashed off the metal letters. A few minutes later, I heard an engine stop, a car idling, someone watching. I didn't turn around. I just listened until they drove off. They weren't gathering proof. They were gathering opinions, and opinions spreads faster than truth. That evening, the pattern continued. Cars slowed. People stared. Someone even left muddy boot prints near the gate like they'd stood there a while around sunset. A notification hit my phone. Neighborhood group chat gives 376 new messages. I scrolled. Screenshots. Rumors. Opinions. Masquerading as facts? He's trying to push us out. He thinks he's above everyone else. Called the cops on families. He wants to build condos. One message stood out: don't speak to him alone. He's confrontational. That was how Karen fought. Not through courts. Through whispers. The next morning, a sound woke me up. A knock, not loud, not aggressive, just firm. I opened the door to find an envelope taped to the wood. No stamp, no return address. My name, written in sharp, slanted handwriting. I opened it, HOA letterhead. Legal language. Notice of violation, denial of community access rights. The wording wasn't just bold. It was smug, basically blaming me in writing for refusing public access to shared community resources and threatening legal action. The date on the letter, Saturday. The day of the confrontation. I checked the date on the deed. Again, 1947. My land existed before the HOA did. Before the neighborhood did. Before most people in the town were even born. They weren't protecting legacy. They were stealing it. I sat down with a cup of coffee on the porch. The lake glowed gold with sunrise, perfectly calm. Hard to believe a place so peaceful could create this much conflict. That's when the real shift happened. Not anger, focus. Karen wasn't just aggressive. She was certain. Certain she had leverage. Certain she could rally people. Certain she wasn't bluffing. Why? Certainty like that doesn't come from entitlement. It comes from a plan. A plan she'd been building long before I arrived. I grabbed my phone and texted, "Tom, she's confident because she thinks she has something. Pull everything, deeds, filings, easements, HOA documents, developer plans. If she's lying big." He replied almost instantly, "Let's see what she's hiding." I set the phone down and stared at the lake again. The same place my grandfather taught me to cast a line. The place he worked double shifts to afford. The place he guarded like a piece of his soul. And I realized something. Karen wasn't just claiming access. She was building an empire. And that meant the first confrontation wasn't the fight. It was just the opening move. War hadn't started. It had only begun to take shape. Monday arrived with the kind of stillness that pretends nothing is wrong. The lake was calm, the air cool, birds cutting across the shoreline like nothing had happened. But the peace felt counterfeit. I'd spent the night piecing together documents, screenshots, property maps, and old survey notes until the lines blurred. I knew there was more underneath the surface. Karen wasn't improvising. She had a strategy. At 8 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Tom, got something. Be home in 30. I didn't bother replying. I just set 2 mugs on the counter and waited. Half an hour later, Tom walked in carrying a thick folder stuffed with printed county records. He dropped it on the table, papers spilling out like a deck of crooked cards. His expression was the kind professionals get when they uncover something rotten. "This," he said, tapping the folder, "isn't about community access. Karen has been planning something bigger." I leaned forward. "How big?" Tom pulled out a set of documents and laid them in order like evidence in court. "Let's start with this. Was a county petition filed 3 years ago requesting easement access on behalf of the Lakeview Meadows HOA. I already knew it was denied. But Tom pointed to something new. "Look at the date," he said. The denial was stamped November 18th. 2 years ago, Karen knew she had no legal standing to claim the lake. She knew before she ever spoke to me, before I moved in, before she hosted her so-called community day. She'd built her lie on top of a verdict she hoped nobody would ever see. "That alone proves intent," Tom said. "She isn't confused. She's knowingly misrepresenting legal facts." I nodded slowly. "So, there's motive. What about profit?" Tom's expression sharpened. "That's where it gets interesting." He pulled out a second stack. Emails, proposals, draft contracts. "This is correspondence between Karen and a developer, a private company based out of Dallas." He flipped to a letterhead stamped Harper Leisure Group, the kind of branding you see on luxury brochures. "Who are they?" I asked. "High-end recreation developers. Fishing clubs. Private lakes. Membership exclusivity." Felt my pulse tighten. "She's trying to sell access to my lake." Tom tapped the page. "Not trying. She already did." He handed me a contract with a deposit receipt. A number leaped off the page like a punch. $200,000. Paid. I sat back slowly. Letting the weight of the number sink in, she took $200,000, I repeated. Based on access she doesn't have? Tom nodded. And she didn't tell the HOA. All they know is they approved $15,000 for lake access improvements. Money she claimed was for surveys and negotiations, and the other 6 figures? I asked. Tom's voice went low. Straight to the project. Consultants, early design drafts, marketing fees. This wasn't a community amenity. It was a private business deal. Bitter laugh escaped me. She built her empire on land she doesn't even own.
How?
Tom's tone became cautious, and she pitched herself as a managing partner. The contract shows she'd take 30% of annual revenue. I stared at the paper, feeling an anger so cold it bordered on clarity. This wasn't about a barbecue by the lake, I said quietly. She's been building this in the shadows for years. Tom nodded. And your arrival ruined her timeline? I stood, pacing toward the window. The lake looked peaceful, innocent even, but now I saw it differently. It wasn't just water, it was currency, leverage, real estate. Gold disguised as still water and pine trees. How did Harper sign off on this? I asked. Tom unfolded a single sheet of paper and held it out carefully. Almost reverently, because she gave him this. At first glance, it looked official county seal, formal formatting, approval signatures. It appeared to authorize shared access easement for Lakeview Meadows community. But something felt off. The font spacing, the signature style, the wording too polished. It's fake, I said. Tom nodded. A forged government document? That alone is felony fraud. But combined with wire transfers, investor deception, and misappropriation of HOA funds. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. This wasn't a property dispute. It was a criminal enterprise, a house of cards balanced on paperwork. She hoped nobody would check. Motive, I whispered. And now you understand why she sent people to intimidate you. Why cars slowed down, why rumors started. You're not a neighbor to her. You're an obstacle. Silence lingered a moment. Then Tom zipped up the folder. We need to build a case. Organized. Complete. When this collapses, it needs to collapse all at once. I nodded. Start pulling every communication between her and the HOA, especially financial records. Tom shook his head slightly. That part may get messy. HOA books aren't easy to access. Just then, there was a soft knock at my door. Not aggressive. Not Karen style. I opened it to find a woman in her early 60s holding a casserole dish. Graying curls, polite posture, nervous eyes. Mr. Brennan. I hope I'm not interrupting. It was Helen, the HOA treasurer. I recognized her from the neighborhood meeting where she sat quietly, observing more than reacting. Tom glanced at her, then at me. I stepped aside. Come in. She set the dish gently on the table. Chicken enchiladas. I thought you might need a friendly gesture after everything that's been happening. Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear of me, but from fear of what she came to say. What can I do for you? I asked. She took a slow breath. I reviewed our HOA financial records last night. Something isn't right. Tom and I exchanged a look. Helen opened a folder full of printed statements. Receipts, bank logs. 3 years ago, Karen asked for $15,000 for lake access negotiations. We approved it unanimously. But when I cross-checked the withdrawals, only $8,500 has any verifiable trail. What about the rest? I asked. Talon shook her head. Either fake receipts or invoices for companies that don't exist. That matches what we've found. But Helen wasn't finished. There's more. Over the past 2 years, she authorized small administrative expenses without board approval. Individually, they looked harmless. Together, they total Almost $12,000. A hush settled over the room as the number lingered. She's been stealing from her own neighbors, Helen said quietly. And now I know why. She needed seed money for whatever she's building. I could see how heavy that truth sat on her shoulders. Loyalty broken. Trust shattered. What do you want to do with this? I asked gently. Helen straightened. Resolve, replacing guilt. I want to help you expose her. She looked directly into my eyes, voice firming. Our community deserves the truth. Tom nodded. We're preparing a full evidence presentation. Legal documents, petitions, fraudulent filings, investor agreements, text threats. Now, thanks to you, financial misconduct. Helen set her folder beside ours. Then, we do it together. Alliance had formed, not through force, not through retaliation, but through truth. Tom closed the box of documents and stood. We present everything at the next HOA meeting. Public, transparent, irrefutable, and when it's done. This doesn't just end her project. It ends her presidency. I walked to the window. The lake shimmered in late afternoon sun, innocent as always. But now I saw the fight differently. It wasn't me versus an HOA president. It was evidence versus ego. Truth versus narrative. Legacy versus ambition. And truth finally had allies. I rested my hand on the old brass key hanging by the door, the same one my grandfather used to lock the gate 60 years ago. Let's do it right, I said. No shouting, no drama. Just truth. Tom nodded. Truth is enough. I looked out across the water one last time. Karen thinks the lake will make her powerful, I said softly. But she forgot something. Tom folded his arms. What's that? I turned back, eyes steady. It already belongs to someone who knows how to fight. The days leading up to the emergency meeting felt heavier than anything that came before. Not chaotic, not loud, just heavy. The kind of pressure that sits quietly on your chest, reminding you that something big is moving beneath the surface. I spent most of Tuesday organizing files into labeled folders: legal, financial, county documents, emails, transcripts, text threats. Tom wanted everything airtight. No loose ends, no emotional arguments, just facts that would land like hammers. For every accusation Karen made, we needed 3 pieces of proof showing she'd lied. Not because I wanted revenge, because the truth deserved armor by afternoon. The kitchen table looked like a war room, documents spread out in neat lines. A projector set up in the corner. A timeline running across poster boards. 3 years of deception laid out like an autopsy. Tom arrived just before sunset, with Ron Harper trailing behind him, tall, polished, tired eyes. The expression of a man who discovered he'd been played for a fool and wanted blood, not anger. Ron shook my hand firmly. I flew down here because I want to look Karen in the eye when she realizes her game is over. I nodded once. You'll get your moment. He set a leather folder on the table and unzipped it. Inside were contracts, wire transfer receipts, email printouts, and a letter from his attorney confirming intent to pursue damages. Ron wasn't here for drama. He was here to bury her professionally. Tom stepped beside him. The DA has everything too. They're reviewing fraud charges. But public exposure helps the case move faster. Tonight matters. Tonight that word hung in the air. It wasn't a fight. It was a reckoning. A thunderstorm rolled in as we loaded documents into boxes. Not violent, just steady rainfall tapping the roof, lightning flickering behind clouds like distant flashbulbs. A fitting backdrop. Before we left, I paused at the door, hand on the old brass gate key. My grandfather would have walked into that meeting taller than anyone else. I wasn't going to do any less. The community center overflowed with cars' hoods, glistening with rainwater. Headlights reflecting puddles, voices spilling out into the night. People weren't strolling in casually. They were gathering like witnesses. Conflict draws crowds. Inside, chairs were packed shoulder to shoulder, more stood in the back. The air smelled like damp coats, coffee, and tension. Helen waved us over to the front row. A stack of HOA account statements lay. Beside her, like evidence waiting for a courtroom, Karen hadn't arrived yet. People whispered, but the tone had shifted. No longer blindly loyal, more cautious. People weren't defending her anymore. They were waiting for answers. That scared her more than anger. 7:03 p.m. the doors swung open and Karen walked in wearing a navy suit and a pearl necklace. The kind of outfit someone wears when they want to appear professional, respectable, untouchable. 2 people followed. Her, one man, broad-shouldered, dark suit, jaw set like a hired shield. The other was a woman holding a briefcase. Karen wasn't here to explain herself. She was here to fight perception. Her eyes scanned the room and froze. When she saw Ron Harper sitting calmly in the 3rd row, the blood drained from her face before she quickly masked it with a brittle smile. She stepped up to the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. Before we begin, I want to address the damaging rumors being spread to tear apart our community. No greeting, no neutrality. Straight to defense. That alone told the room everything." Helen stood. As treasurer, I officially motion to begin with a special presentation regarding financial discrepancies and land access claims. The audience murmured. Karen forced a smile. "Well, if the board insists," Helen cut her off. We voted 3-2. The motion stands. I walked to the front, plugged in the projector, and looked at the crowd. Not angry, not self-righteous, just steady. My name is Michael Brennan. 3 weeks ago, this community was told that my lake belonged to the HOA. Tonight, I'm going to show you exactly what happened. Slide 1 appeared. 1947 deed, Brennan family property, full survey map. No shared access, no easement. I walked them through the history, slowly. Clearly no legal jargon, just plain truth. Then I showed the denial letter, the one from the county, rejecting Karen's easement request. The room shifted. People leaned forward, hands covered mouths. Slide 3. Emails between Karen and Harper Leisure Group. Karen's smile hardened into a frantic stillness. Ron stood. Ms. Morrison assured my company that the HOA legally controlled the lake. Based on these claims, we invested $200,000. Gasps rippled through the room. Ron continued, voice calm but cutting. She provided this document as proof. I clicked to the next slide. The forged county approval letter. A woman in the audience stood. "Karen, is that real?" Karen swallowed hard. "It's a clerical misunderstanding. I was acting for the community." Helen raised a folder. "Then why did HOA funds disappear?" She spread receipts across a table, missing money, fake invoices, undocumented withdrawals. Karen's composure cracked. "You're twisting this?" "I did what I had to do, because our property values depend." On someone shouted from the back, "You lied to us." Another voice, "You stole from us." Third, "You tried to sell our dues for profit." Helen hit the next slide. Unauthorized $12,000 withdrawals plus missing. $6,500 from Lake Fund. Karen turned to the suit-wearing man beside her. "Say something, defend me." He stood, icy expression. "My firm no longer represents you." The room erupted. Karen slammed a hand on the podium. "You don't understand?" "If you just cooperated," I stepped forward, not shouting, just calm. "You built your power on lies. You counted on everyone being too trusting to question you." She pointed at me, voice shaking. "You ruined everything. One spent years building this community." Met her eyes steadily. "You didn't build a community. You've built a business on land you don't own." Silence dropped like a weight. The tension snapped clean. Karen looked around the room, searching for support. No one moved. Not a nod, not a hand. It's just silence. Nothing is lonelier than losing a crowd that once believed you. She grabbed her purse, pushed past the aisle, and stormed out, shoving chairs as she passed. The doors slammed behind her, echoing like a final verdict. Nobody followed. The room stayed silent until Ron finally spoke. My attorneys and I will pursue charges. But I want to thank you, he said, turning toward me, for saving us from a much bigger disaster. I nodded once. No victory, just truth. Tom stepped up. We've submitted everything to the district attorney. This is now a criminal case. People inhaled sharply but didn't speak. They were processing, recalibrating, realizing betrayal isn't just a lie, it's a wound. As the meeting dissolved, to clusters of stunned conversations, I stepped outside into the cool night air. Crickets hummed. Rain had stopped. The sky was clear. Tom joined me. You did it, he said. I shook my head. No, the truth did. He smiled softly. Same thing. We stood there watching people exit the building, voices low, steps uncertain. They didn't look like enemies anymore. It's just neighbors who'd been misled. I breathed in the night air. Deep and steady. Karen came for power, came for peace. Tonight felt like the turning point. Not the end of the fight, but the moment the tide turned. And I wasn't standing alone anymore. The first morning after the meeting felt different. Not triumphant. Not victorious. Just still. The kind of calm that arrives after a storm has already decided where to land. I stepped out onto the porch, coffee in hand, and watched the lake breathe under soft morning light. Mist curled low across the water, drifting like memory. Nothing about the scene looked changed, but I knew everything had. People weren't driving by slowly anymore. No phones pointed at the gate. No cars lingering on the road pretending to admire trees while collecting whispers. Just silence. Pure, unbothered silence. For the first time since moving here, it felt like my land again. Not a battlefield. Not a talking point. Just home. I walked down to the gate with my mug and rested a hand on the old metal latch. The sign hung straight and clean. Private property. Brennan Family Lake. 1947. No need for warnings, threats, or bold red letters. The beauty of truth is that once it stands, it doesn't need to shout. News traveled fast after the meeting. Local papers got hold of the story. Words like embezzlement, forgery, fraud, and misrepresentation printed in stark black ink next to her name. Some neighbors avoided eye contact out of embarrassment, not because they feared me, but because they felt complicit for believing her lies. I didn't blame them. People want to trust someone who speaks with certainty, and Karen spoke like someone who'd already convinced herself the lie was real. The DA's office filed charges within a week. Ron Harper pushed forward with his lawsuit. The HOA board voted unanimously to remove Karen from any position of authority. By the end of the month, she'd moved out of the neighborhood entirely. No farewell party. No petition. No last rally. Some endings don't echo. They just dissolve. A week later, I was in the yard replacing a damaged fence post when Gerald walked up the drive with slow, tentative steps, the same man who once warned me to keep quiet. He stood with his hands in his pockets. "Mike," he began, clearing his throat, "I owe you an apology." I wiped sweat from my forehead and leaned on the shovel. For what? For believing something I wanted to be true instead of something I should have questioned.
Oh.
He paused. We trusted her. Maybe because it was easier than questioning a neighbor. I nodded once. Trust is supposed to be the easy part. Questioning takes courage. He gave a small, sad smile. Well, some of us needed reminding. He left without ceremony. I didn't need more than that. Little by little, more neighbors stopped by. Some just waved from passing cars. Others brought pies or shook my hand with the quiet sincerity of people who finally saw the truth. Forgiveness doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just starts showing up with a casserole dish. One afternoon, Ellen came by with a notebook full of neatly written bullet points, not financial records proposals. "Michael," she said, "the board wants to make an offer. This time a real one. Transparent, legal, optional." I folded my arms, curious but cautious. "We'd like to propose limited access days for families. controlled, respectful, with liability coverage and written permission. Not ownership, just opportunity. For a moment, I didn't answer. Not because I was unsure, but because silence sometimes clears away pride. It's a good idea, I finally said, but it has to be done right. Not through entitlement. Through permission? Helen nodded. Exactly. We agreed to discuss it after everything settled legally. Not as a peace deal, but as a sign that respect can rebuild where lies tried to take root. Spring warmed the water, and one morning my 12-year-old nephew, Jake, flew in from Houston to stay with me for a week. He'd heard bits of the story from his mother, but in a child's mind, conflict turns into legend. He cast his line across the lake, sunlight bouncing off the surface in silver streaks. He caught a bass, small but stubborn, the kind that fights above its weight. I showed him how to unhook it gently and release it back. "Uncle Mike," he asked, "why did people try to take this place?" I sat beside him on the dock, legs dangling over the water. "People don't always want what they deserve," I said. "Sometimes they want what they can convince others belongs to them." He thought about that. Silent. I pulled the old brass gate key out of my pocket, my grandfather's key, worn smooth by decades of U-sand, placed it in Jake's hand. "This land was bought with hard work," I told him. 2 jobs. Long nights. It's part of our family. Someday, when you're older, it'll be your responsibility. He stared at the key like it weighed more than metal. "Do I need to fight for it too?" he asked. I smiled softly. "If the time comes, fight like we did. Not with anger, not with noise. Fight with patience, with law, with truth." He nodded, gripping the key. That moment felt like closing a loop 76 years long. Weeks passed. Grass grew fuller. Water cleared. Birds nested along the shoreline. The world moved on. Sometimes justice feels like fireworks, bright, explosive, unforgettable. But real justice? It feels like waking up one morning and realizing the world finally stopped pushing back. The lake no longer felt threatened. The gate no longer felt defensive. And I no longer felt alone. The truth didn't just win. It settled. It rooted itself. And like water returning to a quiet pond after a storm, everything finally lay smooth again. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, staring out across the dark water. A faint breeze nudged the trees. The surface rippled, gold reflections from the porch light stretching across the lake, for the first time since moving in. I felt something calm settle in my chest. Not victory, not pride, just peace. My grandfather used to say something whenever the world felt overwhelming. Truth is patient. Lies are loud. Now I understood what he meant. People lie because they need others to believe them. Truth doesn't need anyone. It just sits quietly, waiting for someone to uncover it. I leaned back, eyes half closed, listening to the water brush the shore. Some things are worth fighting for, not because of ownership, not because of pride, but because they carry the weight of those who protected them. Before us, this lake wasn't just land, it was a legacy, a reminder that dignity lives not in making others bow, but in standing tall without bending. The world will always have Karens, but it will also have those who choose to stand calm and steady with the truth on their side. Those people change the ending. If this story meant something to you, share your own experience. You never know whose truth might need a witness. And if you believe silence helps the wrong people win, stay with us. We're not done telling stories yet.